Hello there, little masters, and welcome to the new weekly Prancing Pony podcast, where tonight the good stuff will make you as strong as a warrior, as wise as a wizard, and as venerable as a king of dwarves.
Well, of course, too much of that good stuff and you won't be as kind as summer.
Gee, really?
West to How, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the lolly to my lally, Alan Sisto.
Oh, no. That one will not fly.
Too far with that one?
Way too far.
All right, maybe I'll have to dial it back for the next episode.
Thanks, Sean. Folks, tonight we get to the notorious silly elves of Rivendell. Mm-hmm. My complex opinion of them is well known, so why don't we just jump right in and get this over with?
Well, not so fast, my friend. First, it's time for This Week in Tolkien History.
Indeed. And you might note that we've already changed the title of the segment from This Day in Tolkien History to This Week. Fact is, you all don't necessarily listen to this on the Sunday that it's released. Some of you listen to it months later.
Yes.
But many of you listen to it on Monday or later in the week. So let's look at the whole week instead of just one day. Sean, what do you have for us? And
it was a very smart move for us to do that because we've got much more available to us.
Exactly. We can make it a little more interesting.
Yeah. But this week in 1914, Tolkien was preparing to join the army by being a part of the Officers' Training Corps at Oxford. He'd already been doing this for a couple of weeks when, in late October, he wrote to Edith, "Drill is a godsend. I have been up for a fortnight nearly, and I have not yet got a touch even of the real Oxford sleepies."
Aw, the sleepies.
The sleepies, I know.
I got those in college.
Oh, yeah.
Intro to art. Never take an art class right after lunch.
No, I actually had an art class right after lunch, and yes, I got the sleepies all the time.
Lights turned out, you're full.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Man, that was nap central.
The worst.
This month in 1955, 41 years later, The Return of the King was published. Now, no, I'm not expanding the segment to this month in Tolkien history. I'm just setting the stage. This week in 1955, Rainer Unwin, who was a 10-year-old boy, wrote that famous review of The Hobbit for his father 20 years earlier.
Never forget that.
The 10-year-old who wrote about 8 and 9-year-olds who would love it.
Yeah.
He was now grown up and working for his father's firm, Allen and Unwin. He wrote to Tolkien asking, "Before you take your well-earned rest, may I breathe the word of future plans? We did briefly discuss the Silmarillion, and I think we agreed that the time was ripe for its appearance, providing it was in good shape. And I hope that over the next few months, you may have the leisure to prune and prepare this book to meet a public that doubtless awaits it." He also mentioned the essay on fairy stories and suggested that Tolkien rework it from a lecture into a long essay that they could reprint as a small book. And that...
Some good stuff there.
Yeah, and that is This Week in Tolkien History.
Can you imagine if the Silmarillion had actually been ready to publish in Tolkien's lifetime?
Man,
wow.
I really can't. I wish it was. For his sake, I'm sure he would have had so much more peace.
Yeah, I think he would have been very happy to see it published.
Yeah, but it was such a vast work. And, you know, even at this point in 1955, Rainer Unwin made it clear that it needed to be pruned. So
that is true.
I'm sure it was just too much to be done. But I'm so glad, so very grateful that he left it in a good enough shape for Christopher to publish later.
Yeah. On that note, let's move on to that story that Rainer thought would be such a hit for the 5 to 9-year-old set.
That little condescending review.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, when we last left our heroes, they had found some swords in a cave. I'm going to go ahead and start out reading again from the middle of the first paragraph, and we'll pick up from there.
Okay.
One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place full of the noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of snow peaks gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen a thing that looked so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we've got to get through, or over, or under those somehow, before we can come into Wilderland beyond. And it's a deal of a way even from the other side of them to the Lonely Mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo. And I know, that says enough.
Yeah.
And just at that moment, he felt more tired than he ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing, not for the last time.
Not for the last time, indeed.
And it's not even for the first time.
No,
we're
it's
only
not,
in chapter
no.
3.
Yeah, right. That's so great. The reaction. Oh.
Oh. Absolutely
So
love
great.
that.
Man,
It really is. And
talk about a wake-up call for poor little Bilbo.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's honestly, the group is already pretty shaken up from the troll encounter.
Oh, yeah, the troll experience,
You
big
know,
time.
they've got, you know, we saw, you didn't read this part, but the first sentence, you know, that talks about how they didn't sing or tell any stories. You know, they'd begun to feel that danger was not far away. You know,
Yeah.
the encounter with the trolls really has made them
It shook
realize the danger of their journey.
Yeah, and that every step they take is a step closer to more danger.
Right. Yeah. And Bilbo, man.
Yeah. Boy, I love it. He thinks that's the mountain of balance, like
A little bit
yeah,
of false
not even
hope. I'm like,
close.
nope.
No. And then, of course, there's that Bagginsy side again, the thinking of his comfortable chair, comfortable chair, before the fire in his favorite sitting room.
And we talked last time about how every time he thinks of home, you know, that's kind of his escape from where he is, you know, and it's that sort of latching on to that little bit of his hobbit nature that's left to him, that little bit of his identity, because he, you know, I think you pointed out really, really smartly last time that, you know, he's alone on this journey. You know, he's not, he doesn't fit in with the dwarves. And, you know, if he were back home, he wouldn't fit in with hobbits either.
Not anymore. No.
He really is.
Lost their respect.
Yeah. He really is kind of all on his own now. And
He really is.
and he just kind of latches on to these memories of home and his comfortable life.
It's interesting, you know, Tolkien, going back to On Fairy Stories, talks about, you know, fantasy providing escape and talking about the escape of the prisoner as opposed to the flight of the fugitive.
I thought of exactly that, yeah.
And here's Bilbo escaping, but it's not fantasy. You know, this is I mean,
He's living
got
the fantasy,
adventure.
and he wants to escape back
living-
to reality. Yeah.
Exactly. Isn't
Yeah.
that a wild little, you know, flip on that, you know, flips that thing on its head. It's a really interesting look on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, while we won't read the next little bit, Gandalf really kind of spells out exactly what's ahead of them.
Yeah. The
you know,
perils. Yeah.
The perils. Yeah. I mean, you're going to get lost in the mountains, have to start all over. You've got, there's hunger.
We need
There's
food.
danger.
Yeah. We need rest and safety. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
I mean,
no
this
food.
is
There's no
serious
safe
stuff.
places to rest. And the mountains themselves are confusing. It's
Yeah.
and you get this idea that it's only the road that's keeping them from all these perils that are all around them.
Yeah, and boy, will we see that again, right? I mean, stay on the road is a big theme in this book.
That's true. Yeah. We get that in Mirkwood later on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it's a really interesting thought that, you know, there's only one way through this place, and you better, you know, stay focused and stay on the task,
Stay on the
or
path.
you're not going to be able to get there.
Yep.
Absolutely. So they are trying to find Rivendell. He even tells them exactly what they're trying to find. Look, well, this is somewhere ahead of us is hidden this fair valley, and they're expecting us. Now, you would think if they're expecting us, couldn't they send out an escort? I mean, really, could you
Leave a
give us
light
little
on,
help?
flash a beacon, something.
Yeah, exactly. To put out the signpost,
Yeah.
something. I mean, you know, the little open house sign,
Yeah.
the little realtor. Open house.
M.
arrow
Lodgers
this way.
Realty, open house this way. Last homely house.
Oh, goodness.
This way.
That's right. That's right. I love that. Last homely house.
It's such a great phrase. Last homely house.
It is. It is. I know we
it's
see it a
quaint.
couple times here, but
It's very quaint.
it is. It's homey, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's homey and homely, but that's what it is. It creates this sense of, okay, this is a good place to be.
Yeah.
You know, and yet at the same time, there's that little bit of, it's the last
Little hint of
one,
foreboding
right?
because it's the last
A
one
little
that you're
bit.
going to see. You know, this
Absolutely.
is and we get this also with Gandalf calling this the edge of the wild.
The very edge of the wild, yeah. Absolutely. And, I'm sure Bilbo's like, I'm sorry, the trolls weren't in the wild.
Right.
These last few days of marching through, what we think is dangerous territory isn't part of the wild.
Yeah, boy, talk
You mean
about a
it gets
wake-up
worse?
call on that, yeah.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah,
So,
the trolls were in the civilized part of the journey. Wow.
yeah, just wait till you see the uncivilized stuff.
Right.
So what happens with their search?
Okay, well, I'm going to pick it up about just midway through a sentence here, so keep with me here. It was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valleys, and no hills to break the ground in front of them. Only one vast slope, going slowly up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain, a wide land the color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of grass green and moss green, showing where water might be. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains.
The heist might be hidden?
The heist. The heist.
Is that where you're headed with that one? The heist might be hidden?
They lost the heist. Where's the heist?
They did. Oh,
man.
The house, I mean, this is a hard place to find.
Yeah,
you know?
it's a house. It's a hidden village in a valley.
Yeah.
I don't know where Elrond got that idea of a hidden elf
hidden city in a valley. I mean, really,
something.
He couldn't have had any previous elvish experience.
Was it Jondolin? Rondolin? I can't remember.
I prefer Fondolin, actually.
Bet you do.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah, bad stuff. Okay, so we digress.
Let's get off of that one.
Terrible.
Oh, man.
Really, it's going to get worse if we don't.
Let's just stop it there. But there's no. I mean, it really is hidden. Yeah. There's no outward signs.
It is
of anything being there. There's nothing to break the ground. Just a vast slope.
Imladris, 1.2 miles. Exit right. There isn't anything like that.
No signs.
It would be helpful.
No. But this is one of those beautiful passages. One of those beautiful Tolkien-like descriptions of.
Illustrative.
Yes. It's so great.
So rich.
The color of heather and crumbling rock, and the distinction between the grass green and the moss green. Oh,
I know.
So great.
And even the stuff we didn't have you read, the talking about the unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides, and the gullies they could leap over, but with deep waterfalls in them.
Yeah.
And even the threatening bogs. I mean, while pretty, the green, pleasant places to look at with flowers, but a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again.
Yeah,
the beauty is perilous here.
Perilous is a good word for it. It is, one might call it a perilous realm. I mean, it's not the perilous realm, because we know the perilous realm is, fairy with a capital F, the West. But still, it's a reminder that there's a touch of fairy. There's an otherworldliness about Rivendell.
Yeah,
and it's a beautiful place, but a dangerous place because it's elves themselves are beautiful but dangerous.
That is true,
and it's dangerous to get involved with them.
Boy.
So that's kind of cool.
As we'll find out. It's also unwise to ask them counsel, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So they do find a path eventually, a little bit, just marked with little white stones that some of them were covered up. So it was very, very hard to find this path in the hills. Even though Gandalf knew where he was going, I mean, he at least seemed to.
I mean, he knows these people. He's already talked to them once today.
Yeah, presumably he's been there at least once.
Well, and we know he has because of his other his journeys.
That's true.
But I mean he can't find it.
No, and I half expect him to turn around and say, "When in doubt, Pippin, follow your nose." But he doesn't.
Or something about elf doors are so clever, or elf towns are so cleverly hidden that even their masters cannot find them. Their secrets are forgotten.
As I start this next read, it starts with a recognition of what time of day it is again. Okay, so I'm going to start here. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall on the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Man, I love that
Beautiful
description.
sight.
You can smell. You can
Yes.
almost smell that.
Oh yeah, it is a total sensory experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
The scent of trees was in the air. I know we're going to get to the famous "It smells like elves" line, but I prefer smelling like trees.
Well,
Mostly because you only know what those elves eat, man. Oh, smelling like elves.
I think elves smell delightful. Thank you very much.
I don't know. They eat so many greens. They're probably eating, too much
That could be.
cabbage
There could
and
be some. There could be
cauliflower
some
and-
sulfurous compounds in there.
There's sulfurous compounds.
I didn't think
really?
about that when I did my elf smell essay a long time ago.
Hidden? No, thankfully you
No,
didn't,
that's good.
and I didn't.
No, I
remind
needed you. I would have needed you to get me there.
Of course, because I'm the. What am I, the Shrek to your donkey or something?
That works. Let's go with that.
It does, doesn't it?
That
Donkey.
works. Come on, Trek. What are you talking about, Shrek?
Oh man, parfaits have layers.
In the morning, I'm making
Anyway.
waffles.
I love
That's
that.
one of my favorite
He
ones.
is hilarious in that
Yes,
film. I got to
I know.
admit, he really is. He makes that film. So, what a dangerous little place. This is hidden so steeply that even Gandalf's horse nearly falls down the
Yeah.
slope. And this, just amazingly well hidden, but in nature. It's not like it's hidden with magic or hidden behind a wall.
Right.
Like Gondolin. I mean, Gondolin's
that's
a
true,
hidden
yeah.
city in a valley, but then it's surrounded by a wall.
True.
So, here, this doesn't need to be walled. It's just stuck in this super tight valley that, I guess if you can get there, then you can have
Then you can have access to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty amazing place, though. Really,
Yeah.
absolutely stunning. Not the attention to detail of these natural features is
That's
really
one of the
amazing.
things
I
Tolkien
absolutely
does
love it.
so well. And with the Silmarillion being such a 10,000-foot view so much of the time, we didn't really get a whole lot of that with the Silmarillion. But I'm really glad that we're here in the Hobbit where we get so much more of this, and Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings will get more of it.
We'll get a ton more.
It's just
Yeah.
it's beautiful. There's so much appreciation for the natural world, which we know that's
The landscape descriptions
Yeah.
are just beyond
Yeah.
belief. Nobody does it like
nobody
he
does it like him. It's true.
Really. No.
But
I like.
you started by talking about
Go ahead, I'm so sorry.
about tea time, right? But the time.
Yeah,
of day.
exactly. I think
Yeah.
you're going where I was going to go. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of we talked about this in the last episode. It's just another reference to he's missing, these comforts of home,
Yep.
isn't he? Tea time and
Yeah.
supper time, these regular meals.
Yep.
We talked about, you talked about how the pony began to stumble. He's even missing even roads. It's
Yeah.
just it's all signs of this increasing discomfort and how sort of unwelcoming this landscape is. Even though this is a beautiful but dangerous, as we discussed, place, it's uncomfortable for him, and it is a bit of a struggle for Bilbo.
Yeah. It is, but you see in the next little bit between what I've read and what you're going to read next, we get that the air grows warmer as they go
Yes.
lower. The smell makes him drowsy.
Yes.
Is this? It seems to me like there's this sense of crossing a threshold, that he's really going from one world
Yes.
into
I
another,
agree.
one realm into another. Like you talked about this perilous realm,
Yeah.
that it's it really is. There's something truly magical about this in that most natural
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it's a real elvishness, a real fairy quality to the crossing over.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so full of sensory information.
the
I
voice
mean,
of the
everything
water,
from
the scent of the
Yeah.
trees, and then the light. Yeah.
the warmer air, the
Yeah,
drowsiness,
the warmer air. Yeah.
all of this is just it's impacting him in every one of his senses.
Yeah.
It seems.
Nodding and bumping his nose on the pony's neck. I love the fact that as he's getting drowsy, the rest of it, the rest of this episode sort of takes on a kind of a dreamlike quality to him. I think
It does. Yeah.
but there's also a very tactile feel to that. We can
True.
feel that along with him, and then him nodding and bumping his nose on the pony's neck. Like you said, it's that full sensory experience.
Yeah, it really is. But you've got the next little bit, including some of the poetry.
Yes, and I'm not going to read the whole poem, but I'll do a little bit like I
No.
did with the dwarf poem a couple of episodes ago. I'll read the beginning and the end. But anyway, let me start with the...
We'll talk about
Yeah,
all of
oh,
it, of course.
absolutely. Well, let me start with a little bit of the prose before that. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then there came a burst of song, like laughter in the trees. "Oh, what are you doing, and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing. The river is flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-lally, here down in the valley." And then I'll skip ahead to the end. "Oh, will you be staying, or will you be flying? Your ponies are straying. The daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune. Ha-ha!" So they laughed and sang in the trees. And pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think it. Not that they would care. They would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course.
I love that. It's not even revealed that it's elves
until the very end.
After the entire song.
The first thing we see about them is this silliness, and I think we need to spend some time on this because,
I think we do.
I love it because it's fun. It's a far cry from the serious, the grave elves.
After reading the Silmarillion, this is are we talking about the same elves
how can
here?
These be the same elves? And these are the same elves. These are not wood elves. These are Noldor.
Yeah.
These are the high elves. These are survivors and perhaps some descendants, but probably a lot of them were survivors of the First Age in Beleriand.
Yep.
And they're doing this. I think Corey Olsen makes a really good case for let's see, getting ahead of myself here, but
no, I think I know where you're headed.
I think
you're right. I mean, he talked about...
I've got some notes right here. Yeah.
Because of all that hardship,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean,
so Corey Olsen says that they are delighted by everything, that they are connected with the world in a deeper and stranger sense, taking pleasure in all of its ways and varieties. And I think this is really key to understanding the nature of these elves. They are a little silly. They do seem to be just cavorting and carrying on in just a ridiculous way.
Cavorting, great word.
But it's because they just take delight in the natural world in a way that we could not possibly understand.
That's
Everything just delights them so much.
Well, they're such a part of the world
exactly,
in a way that we're not.
Yeah, their life is artists, and artists' life is theirs.
Exactly.
And I think the fact...
And this is their home, for men.
Yeah, that's true. We're the guests.
This isn't their home. Yeah. Now, we don't know about the dwarves, but the hobbits are descended from men. So for Bilbo, right. This is not the place that we will be forever, but it's the place where the elves are for all of their lives.
And so when you think about it that way, this really is very consistent with the depiction of elves elsewhere in Tolkien's Legendarium.
And it's a good balance to some of those things,
too.
I mean, as much as I tease the Tra-la-la-lally elves, and I still will because it's fun.
It is fun. It's silly.
Provide this, they show this side of the elves that we don't see in the Silmarillion because it's so serious. Right. And we're reminded of the joy, just the pure joy that elves can experience, and even elves who've experienced the stuff that they have.
Exactly.
They're not sitting around all day, I really wish I was still in Beleriand.
Yeah, when you think about, well, I wish I hadn't left Valinor with Feanor all those millennia ago.
That Feanor idiot.
Yeah.
Well, that only took a few episodes into the Hobbit before we could bash Feanor.
Boom.
Get out that pinata.
Whack. They're not sitting around moping about, man, the grinding ice, that was tough. Or, man, the near ninth Arnordiad, I'm still so sad about that. They have seen true hardship. They have seen tragedy, and they have seen death and destruction. They've seen the destruction of everything, their entire world.
Yeah. And yet
they're still able to laugh and take joy in the natural world. And I think
they have hope. That's the thing. It all comes down to that, doesn't it?
It comes from them having hope. They have Estel. And they know they have
not
this connection.
Amdir.
Yeah. And so I think...
I love that. That's such a key distinction, too.
It is. And I think that honestly, I hate to, credit it to Corey Olsen again, but...
Oh, no. Did he do it before we did?
Yeah, he did. Honestly, he made the best argument for these elves that I've ever seen. And it's in that book, the exploring J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Where he talks about
Well, and
that
it's also in our episode with him, episode 52.
We did talk about I made sure to talk about it with him because it's something that really resonated with me because for a long time I always liked it because it's fun, it's silly, and I kind of get a laugh out of it. But I think looking at it from this lens, you really see how it really is not a stretch at all. It's not at odds with the depiction of elves elsewhere in the legendary. It actually is very fitting. It's different. It's a different angle on it. Yeah. But it's very in keeping with the nature of elves that Tolkien has laid out elsewhere.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, it really is.
And I love that.
I do too. We're not going to read this next little bit, but there's a line here about the fact that Bilbo, I love this, he loved elves, so there's a little bit of Sam, and his love of elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. There's a couple things in there. He seldom met them, so he did meet them.
He has met them, yeah, that's true.
He had met elves, but he was also frightened of them.
Yeah.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's more to these elves than meets the eye, and there's a little bit of an intimidation factor, I think, for mere mortals to encounter the elves, to encounter these beings that have been alive for thousands upon thousands of years.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Dwarves, of course, and I love this. Tolkien makes it very clear. Dwarves don't get on well with them.
No.
Even Keeley.
Yes, even Keeley does not have the thing for
get on well with dwarves.
Ladies.
No.
Yeah. Dwarves think they're foolish.
Yeah,
which I love
is, as Tolkien points out, a very foolish thing to think.
So it's just that the narrator reminding us that there is more to them than meets the eye. That they are these ancient creatures that have more power than they seem.
Yeah.
Don't be fooled by all this silly carrying on.
And yet,
what do you make of their obsession with the dwarves' beards?
I know. I was thinking the same thing. Elves so rarely have facial hair. I mean, we get a few exceptions like Círdan, but I think there's a little bit of that's just such a weird thing.
Yeah.
We should poke fun of that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But what I found really interesting was, Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony. So they know his name.
Mm-hmm.
They know his name. They know who he is. They know that he's a hobbit, not a dwarf.
Right.
I mean, they call that out. Even though he's, again, presumably still wearing the Dwalin's old hood and Dwalin's old cloak.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And yet they recognize him. So,
but he doesn't know them.
No, he does not know them. He knows of them, and he's met elves, but not these.
Right.
Tired as he would. Apparently, I am tired too. Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay a while. Elvish singing is not a thing to miss in June under the stars, not if you care for such things. Also, he would have liked to have a few private words with these people that seemed to know his names and all about him, although he had never seen them before. He thought their opinion of his adventure might be interesting. Elves know a lot and are wondrous folk for news, and know what is going on among the peoples of the land as quick as water flows, or quicker. But the dwarves were all for supper as soon as possible just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies, till they were brought to a good path, and so at last to the very brink of the river. It was flowing fast and noisily, as mountain streams do of a summer evening, when sun has been all day on the snow far up above. There was only a narrow bridge of stone without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could well walk on, and over that they had to go, slow and careful, one by one, each leading his pony by the bridle. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and they sang a merry song as the party went across. "Don't dip your beard in the foam, father," they cried to Thorin, who was bent almost onto his hands and knees. "It is long enough without watering it." "Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes," they called. "He's too fat to get through keyholes yet." "Hush, hush, good people, and good night," said Gandalf, who came last. "Valleys have ears, and some elves have over-merry tongues. Good night." And so at last they all came to the last homely house, and found its doors flung wide. Okay,
very nice.
There's a lot to unpack.
There's so much there, yeah.
I love the first thing that we see is that Bilbo, tired, and we know he's hungry because the dwarves are all for supper, he wants to stay. What an impact this has
the singing,
on him.
it really touched him. Elvish singing is not a thing.
That he's willing to give up rest and food, which, as we know, are
that's
the
like
two things he's been obsessed
right,
about
for a hobbit. That's
for
saying
weeks.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
that he would like to stay.
Absolutely. And, and then also at the end, that little comment about he's too fat to get through keyholes yet. That's just creepy. That is disturbingly prescient. I cannot talk tonight.
It's all right.
I mean, I'm not going to edit that or anything. It's just like, I can't.
It happens.
Stumbling all over the
happens.
place. It does. I know. It really is. It's disturbingly prescient. And Gandalf is like, excuse me?
Right.
Would you just please shut up? Don't talk like that. But, it reflects the accuracy of that statement that's earlier in there about that elves are wondrous folk for news, that they know what's going on as quick as water flows or quicker.
I love that phrase.
Tell me that made you think of something. Did that make you think of something or someone?
Yeah, it did. Actually, it made me think of Ulmo and the way he gathers news from the waters of the world. Yeah.
From the waters of the world. It's like, really? There's a very Ulmo reference there without thinking about it too hard.
And it's such a cool phrase, too. I love that phrasing.
Now, I will admit the film's got this part right about the narrow bridge of stone without the parapet.
Yeah.
That I remember that camera shot where they kind of did that top-down
That's right, yeah.
Of this
narrow
bridge.
That was really good.
Yeah. So they got that right. And that's a useful defense, as we know. A very, as long as it's narrow. Big bridges for getting entire armies out, not such a good defense.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's probably, Elrond probably learned a little bit from the fall of Nargothrond, from that,
That's kind of what I'm thinking. We'll
do a bridge,
narrow.
but it'll be a narrow one without a parapet, because we're not going to make the same mistake Turin made.
Yeah.
But
you shall bring us a bridge. A nice little skinny one without a parapet.
Nicely done.
We are the elves who say tra-la-la-lally.
Lally! Lally!
Lally, 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 lally.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. That's good. That's fun
another
stuff.
interesting possible first stage connection. The bright lanterns. You notice the elves have bright lanterns?
Oh, I had not thought about that, but you are correct. Those wonderful lanterns.
I wonder if those, like those Feanorian lamps that we saw in Tuor's story. It doesn't say they are. We know that those Feanorian lamps in the first stage they shone with this really characteristic blue light, and we don't see that here, but they are bright. So I don't know. There's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a thought. It's a thought. Don't dip your beard in the foam. It's long enough without watering it. Man,
funny.
That's almost like a yo mama joke. I mean, for dwarves, bagging on
your
the beard.
Your beard is so long. How long is it?
How long is it? Oh, man.
There's so much.
Too bad I don't have a punchline for that one.
That's not.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for it.
There's a lot of silly language, though, isn't there?
Teasing Thorin.
Even,
there really is.
Even just, interesting word choices that they use, like delicious and wonderful. That's going back a little bit, but isn't it delicious? Oh, most astonishing, wonderful.
Most astonishing, wonderful. That is such nonsense. Yeah. You're right. My goodness.
So funny. Actually, as I'm going back at that, I'm remembering there's another song as ridiculous as the one I've written down in full. They went off into another song. Really? No, it just says, then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one I had written down in full.
Yes, that's right. The narrator. Another one of these comments where the narrator's kind of reminding you that he's just telling a story.
They're fun. I love these elves. They're great.
They are. They're definitely fun. We get that the narrator talks about how, look, when things are bad, detail is important. When things are good, it's hard to remember the details. They were here with Elrond for 2 weeks or more.
Yeah.
And even though we're not going to read this line, I really want to touch on it. Bilbo would gladly have stopped there forever and ever, even supposing a wish would have taken him right back to his hobbit hole without trouble.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, how many times has he already been wishing that he was back home? And here, even if a wish could make him go back home, he would stay
That's
here.
True. Yeah. Well, so we see a little bit about what brings Bilbo back here later, don't we? This really was the perfect place for him.
This really is. You're right. It's the perfect place for the two sides of Bilbo. He gets the songs and the stories of adventure while remaining in this safe and, comfortable environment where he's well fed. Just amazing. I love that. Love that line.
Yeah.
But you've got a passage to read for us.
Yeah, and then we'll get a little bit more about that idea that it's perfect. So I'm going to...
Welcome to Rivendell, Mr. Baggins.
The master of the house was an elf friend, one of those people whose fathers came into the strange stories before the beginning of history, the wars of the evil goblins and the elves and the first men in the north. In those days of our tale, there were still some people who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors, and Elrond, the master of the house, was their chief. He was as noble and as fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior, as wise as a wizard, as venerable as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it. His house was perfect, whether you liked food, or sleep, or work, or storytelling, or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Evil things did not come into that valley.
Boy, that alone
Evil things don't come
makes
there.
it such an amazing place. They just don't come there. For whatever reason. I mean, he doesn't tell you, the narrator doesn't say because of the enchantment or because they're repulsed by how good things are. I mean, it's left to you to figure out why or how evil doesn't come
we're not
there.
told that there's like a girdle of Melian or anything like that, and there's no reason to believe that there is something that, certainly nothing that powerful, but even something of that, of that, like a physical barrier. But just evil things just don't come there. There's,
Yeah. It's a Jedi mind trick. They don't want to go there. This is not the valley you're looking for. Right. And it's just this perpetual, what do you make of the elf friend thing? I mean, clearly he's talking about, the blending of the first men in the north and the elves, right? So the elves and heroes of the north.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking about, Elrond's ancestry, the way that we know it. Obviously that he's got ancestry of both elves and men. But the fact that he's referred to as an elf friend as opposed to an elf.
Yeah.
Remember that the Edain are usually called the elf friends.
Right.
And so, I mean, this would almost lead us to believe that, like Elrond had chosen the fate of men and that he was actually a man as opposed to an elf. I don't know if this is maybe just something that Tolkien didn't retcon later on, or maybe he wanted to leave it as sort of a misunderstanding by Bilbo. I'm not really sure. I can't quite figure that out.
I know. That's one. I mean, because we'll look into that for a postscript, maybe. I don't know.
Honestly, I looked into it for this episode and I couldn't really find much on it. But we can look some more.
Yeah, if there's not much, there's not much. I trust you probably already did do all the research because I know you.
Well, when it comes to anybody who's tangential to Earendel,
that's kind of what I figured.
Would have done my research.
Yeah, years and years ago. That's one you do have it off the top of your head.
Right. You would think it would just be simpler to say the master of the house was an elf.
Yeah, but, an elf lord. Really. Yeah. I mean, he's noble and fair in face as an elf lord. Well, it's probably because he is an elf lord.
He's compared to an elf lord. Right. Right, I know.
I love that description of him, and in all fairness,
it's a beautiful description.
No movie character could encompass all of that. But to be noble and fair as an elf lord, yet to be as strong as a warrior, also as wise as a wizard, and as venerable as a king of dwarves, and still be as kind as summer.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's rich. That really is. I want to go to this house, though. My goodness, because I like all of those things depending on the day.
Food, sleep, work,
storytelling. Maybe I can skip the singing. We'll let somebody else do that. But sitting and thinking.
No singing.
All of no singing. There'll be no singing here.
We'll have no singing. I'd rather.
No.
I'd rather just
stop that.
Sing.
So we digress again. I swear. Sometimes I think we should have done those T-shirts. It just should have said, instead of the finest Tolkien podcast this side of Brie or whatever it said, we should have just had it said, we digress.
I am not going to lie to you. My wife actually suggested that.
Yeah, it would be a total inside joke. I don't know that.
Yeah,
that's
the problem. Yeah. That's the problem with it, is that it's too much of an inside joke. But it's so apropos.
It really is. I mean, every episode. I love kind of the amazing restoration that happens. I mean, remember how we've talked about about fantasy being an escape, but also not just escape, but this restoration of, restoration, I guess, is really just the word I'm looking for. Not necessarily.
They get rest. They get restocking of their provisions.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, some of it's literal and just they get some more clothes
Yeah.
or some more food and they get their clothes fixed. But their clothes weren't just mended; their bruises,
Right.
their tempers,
Right.
and their hopes were mended.
Yes, exactly.
I love that. There's just so much richness there. Yeah, I mean, they did get new food, but it wasn't just that they were given food. It was light to carry,
Yeah.
but strong enough to get them over the mountain pass.
Yeah.
Their plans were improved.
Hope, I think,
Everything
is
got
really
better.
hope is really key there. I think, honestly,
And their hopes, yeah. Their tempers
Yeah.
and their hopes. It was such a
Yeah.
great line.
But you're
Because-
right. Yeah, their plans were improved with the best advice. I mean, they get so much out of this. They get, the word that comes to mind is enlightened. They get enlightened by their
Absolutely.
time.
And that's because of where they are. I mean, this is a bit of fairy in Middle Earth. I mean, it's not the land of fairy, capital F, it's not the West, but it's a touch of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why, and I think it's so interesting that, when they're first, I don't think I mentioned this a moment ago, but when they first ride down into the valley, when Bilbo makes the comment about it smells like elves, which,
Right.
I did a pondering on once upon a time.
I remember that. Smells like elf spirit, right?
Yeah. He looks up at the stars.
Yeah.
He sees the stars. At the time that he notices elves, he also sees the stars. And then we see another mention of the stars when it says, elvish singing is not a thing to miss in June under the stars.
Under the stars.
That's reminders of that light. Remember, we talked about the stars as, the light of Varda and the way light is such a powerful metaphor for enlightenment and all that. And you just get so much of that. Rivendell is such a place of light and stars. And, hey, look who Elrond's dad is. So, of course, it's close to the stars.
Of course it is. And it's such a stark contrast to the beginning of the chapter when they wouldn't even sing. They weren't talking much. They were,
That's
just
a really good point. Yeah.
drudging on. And here we are just a few pages later, and they're all refreshed and they're all strong, and their tempers and hopes have been mended. Oh,
Yeah.
what a phrase.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
phrase.
It really makes you want to go there. They do those
does.
things that you see on Facebook. Which of these places would you want to visit the most? And Rivendell is always the one that I put.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm only going to get to go to one, yeah. I mean, sure, I want to go to Minas Tirith too. Sure, I want to go to the Shire, but if I could only go to one, it's going to be Rivendell. What a magical place.
And Lothlorien would be great. I'd love to hang with Galadriel, but I don't know. I could get lost in Rivendell's libraries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Can you imagine the encyclopedias on those shelves? Make the World Book look like nothing.
Man. Yep.
So they get to Midsummer Eve, and they're ready to go on again. We're going to get a little bit more wisdom here. I'm going to take the next couple paragraphs.
All right.
Elrond knew all about runes of every kind. That day he looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair, and he said, "These are not troll make. They are old swords. Very old swords of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the goblin wars. They must have come from a dragon's horde or goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many ages ago. This, Thorin, the rune's name, Orcrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glamdring, foe hammer that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well." "Whence did the trolls get them, I wonder?" said Thorin, looking at his sword with new interest. "I could not say," said Elrond, "but one may guess that your trolls had plundered other plunderers, or come on the remnants of old robberies in some hold in the mountains. I've heard that there are still forgotten treasures of old, to be found in the deserted caverns of the mines of Moria, since the dwarf and goblin war." I was originally going to stop with the plunderers, and then I realized just how much can be revealed by that last little sentence, too.
The Mines of Moria.
Mines
I'm
of
glad
Moria.
you did that.
Immediately, Elrond, not surprisingly, identifies the swords as coming from Gondolin.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the first step, isn't it? This is the first thing that Tolkien
is really
does.
important. This is a big step for Tolkien. This is really
The insertion.
the first step. Yeah, the insertion of Bilbo's story into the mythology.
It is. It is big.
And it's huge. And this is not a later edition. This is something that was in the first edition.
That's right.
This reference to Gondolin was in the first edition. The only change that is present in the first edition versus the edition that we're more familiar with is that Elrond calls them gnomes.
Gnomes, of course.
Instead of high elves of the West, my kin, because, of course, Tolkien was still using that term, as we've discussed before.
The gnomes were the Noldor at that point, right?
Right, right, exactly. And then later they become the high elves of the West, my kin. Mm-hmm. Interesting that he does say my kin there, so again, another clear marker of his lineage there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this was there from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
This connection to Gondolin.
And, folks, I should just, as a quick sidebar, mention that if you want a little bit more on that, you should check out was it 42 and 43 or 41? Well, 42 is the fall, so that would have been 41
was the
and
fall.
42.
41 was Tuor's coming to Gondolin. Yeah. 41,
Definitely
42.
check out 42 for sure, because that's about the fall itself, and that'll give you a little bit more insight.
Yeah, if you've just started listening with The Hobbit, and especially if you're not familiar with the Silmarillion, go back to episode 42, and we've got a little overview of the fall of Gondolin there.
Yeah, you'll enjoy that one. But you are a resident word nerd. Have a little bit on Orcrist and Glamdring.
I don't get many chances to do that in The Hobbit because, most things are just the hill or the water.
Can you tell us about the indefinite article there, Sean?
Right, exactly. That's all I usually get. But no, here I've got some good Elvish word nerdery. So let me dive in here. The sword Orcrist, the Goblin Cleaver, that's called.
Yeah.
That is, you can actually pick that one apart pretty easily if you know just a little bit of Elvish.
Yeah.
The first part is orc, meaning orc or goblin. And then the second part is wrist, which means cleaver. We've seen that before in the name of another weapon, if you recall, Baron's knife Angrist.
The one that he took from
one of the
Celegorm?
seas.
Curufin.
Was it Celegorm or Curufin?
I can't remember which one.
One of the sea sons of Feanor.
Yeah.
Such
Angrist charming fellows.
Yes, such great guys.
Just like their dad.
Whack. So Angrist was the iron cleaver because remember it could carve iron as easily as carving green wood.
Green wood, yeah.
Yeah, and cut the Silmaril from Morgoth's crown.
Yep.
So that was Angrist. This is Orcrist, the goblin cleaver.
Okay.
Glamdring, the foe hammer. That actually comes from glam. Now, glam actually is a root that means noise, literally.
Okay.
But in a lot of Tolkien's early writings, if you look at things like the early Lays of Beleriand, like the Lay of... it's either in the Lay of Leithian or I think it's actually the Lay of the Children of Hurin.
Okay, I think so.
The orcs are called Glamhoth.
Yeah, the Glamhoth.
Glamhoth literally means like the noisy horde or the noisy crowd or something like that. And so Glam literally means noise, but because of this word Glamhoth, it was an early name for orcs too. Okay. So that's the element Glam. And then the other part, Dring, apparently means hammer. I have not been able to find it in any other word, but it seems to be, obviously, it seems to be a word that means hammer.
Okay. Well, we'll have to take your word for that.
Goblin cleaver and foe hammer.
Love it.
And one thing we get that's awesome about Glamdring is that it belonged to the King of Gondolin.
Yep, that would be Turgon.
And of course, that we know that's Turgon because he's the only guy who was ever King of Gondolin.
Yep. Much to Myglin's dismay.
Much to Myglin's chagrin, yeah. But remember, if you're a new listener, and maybe this is I don't think this is new for anybody at this point, but Elrond's ancestry. Turgon was his great grandfather.
Yep.
He's the son of Earendel, who was the son of Idril, who was the daughter of Turgon.
Yep, absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's where knowing the Silmarillion really does enhance the story. I mean...
Yeah, you're not kidding
with
about
the Silmarillion, we always had to say, spoiler alert, and we would try not to spoil stuff even if it was in that very chapter. Here we assume anybody listening to this has read The Hobbit, because it's The Hobbit.
Yeah, definitely.
But we'll be calling back to things in the Silmarillion so that you can go back to those things and look them up and listen maybe to our episodes from that. But really just
and that
stuff.
Gets us right back to why we read the Silmarillion first, right?
That's exactly why.
So that we could bring up this kind of stuff.
That gives us the background that we need. Now, obviously, there's not as many opportunities to bring that background into this text, but when we get to the Lord of the Rings, there will be a ton of opportunities to really call on all of that First Age stuff, throughout the entire set of
so much.
The entire story. I can't wait.
Yeah.
The luck that they had to find two amazing swords in a single troll horde.
In a troll cave of all things. Yeah, of all
This
things.
is that. It's the same thing about the luck again. This is another example of, we've talked about providence and fate and chance, and how what appears to be chance is really an unexplained thing that's fate, and fate is just the temporal working out of the providence of the plan of Iluvatar, because all of this is tied together, and without the finding of these weapons, so much else changes. So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Luck. So this
Yeah,
is why I got so fired up, by the way, in episode 52 about the way that Jackson approached the notion of luck in these films. With Thorin saying, "We make our own
51,
luck."
you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, 52 was Corey Olsen.
Yeah.
I didn't get fired up in that one at all.
Oh, no, not at all. No, there's
No, I
nothing to
love
get
that
fired.
one. That was totally different. In 51, you're right. Thank you. This notion of luck and how it plays such a hugely important role, all to be
it's true.
concluded at the end of the story, and it's something that we'll discuss when we hit the last chapter.
Well, and
But,
you can go back to episode 52 and hear a little
51.
bit about, we talked about the Hobbit luck and,
51. You said 52 too. I tricked you.
No, but actually, no, in 52, we talked to Corey Olsen about, Hobbit
Oh, yeah,
luck.
we did. You're right. Hobbit luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a fun one.
But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, Bilbo's luck is so key to the entire story, and
Without the key, they don't get the swords. Without
the
the swords,
key, they don't get into the cave, and they don't get the food, and they maybe don't continue.
Maybe
on
they
the-
don't even make it
continue
any
on the
further.
journey.
They certainly don't
But
get
then,
the
yeah,
swords.
they certainly don't get the swords, and look at all the amazing things they're going to do with these swords,
Yeah.
and that that
Well, if
Frodo and
it
Sam
weren't
are
for
going
the
to do
escape, if it weren't for the escape that was made possible by Glamdring in particular,
That's true.
Bilbo
That's
would
true.
never have fallen off the back of whichever dwarf was carrying him at the moment and eventually found the ring.
That is a very good point.
I mean, this is central
That's
to
true.
so much of the
Well,
of the
and
legendary.
think of all the things that Frodo and Sam are going to do with Sting.
Absolutely.
In Lord of the
Huge.
Rings.
Hugely important.
Gandalf is going to continue to wield Glamdring in Lord of the Rings.
Yep. Yes, he will.
So,
Now, what do you make of Elrond seemingly not saying, "These are my swords. Thank you for finding them. Here's your reward. I'm keeping these. These are his by right."
yeah, they are his by right because he is the only descendant of,
Yeah.
the senior descendant
There you
of
go.
Of Turgon at this point, because obviously there is another line out there that's descended from that
Aragorn,
as well.
has a claim to it.
Right.
As young as
no,
he is
they're
at this point.
They are definitely his by right. But I think what he's doing is he's giving them to Thorin and Gandalf because I think he knows that they're going to be able to do more with them than he is.
Yeah.
It's first of all, I think partly giving the sword to Thorin, I think, is a little bit of a symbolic piece between dwarves and at least these elves.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's just a token of, you're my guest, here's a gift. I think there's something there. But I also think it's a bit like we saw with Círdan giving Gandalf the Ring of Fire.
Yes.
The Elrond knows that the swords are going to do more in the hands of Thorin and Gandalf because they're going off on this quest.
Yeah.
Than if
Elrond
he were to
knows
keep
he's
them in
staying.
Rivendell as
Yeah.
heirlooms of his house.
That's all they're going to ever be.
Right. He'll hang them up on the wall somewhere and say, yeah, this was worn by Turgon of Gondolin,
Yeah.
my grandfather, my great grandfather. But no, he gives them to Thorin and Gandalf so that they can use them, so that they
Absolutely.
can slay orcs again, and I think that's a big deal.
And Thorin's very much looking forward to that they might.
He
May it soon
certainly
cleave
is.
goblins once again. Something that Elrond says is very, very likely to happen.
Yes,
so he takes a look
exactly.
at the map, and we've got a great section on the map.
Yeah, I do love this section. The moon was shining in a broad silver crescent. He held up the map, and the white light shone through it. "What is this?" he said. "There are moon letters here, beside the plain runes which say 5 feet hide the door and 3 may walk abreast." "What are moon letters?" asked the hobbit, full of excitement. He loved maps, as I have told you before, and he also liked runes and letters and cunning handwriting, though when he wrote himself it was a bit thin and spidery. "Moon letters are rune letters, but you cannot see them," said Elrond, "not when you look straight at them. They can only be seen when the moon shines behind them, and what is more, with the more cunning sort, it must be a moon of the same shape and season as the day when they were written. The dwarves invented them, and wrote them with silver pens, as your friends could tell you. These must have been written on a midsummer's eve and a crescent moon, a long while ago." "What did they say?" asked Gandalf and Thorin together, a bit vexed perhaps that even Elrond should have found this out first, though really there had not been a chance before, and there would not have been another until goodness knows when. "Stand by the grey stone when the thrush knocks," read Elrond, "and the setting sun, with the last light of Durin's day, will shine upon the keyhole."
Oh, my. Oh, my goodness. Now, what are the odds? Here's luck again, right?
There's luck
Midsummer's
again,
Eve
yep.
crescent moon.
A midsummer's eve crescent moon, the exact moon, the exact shape and season as the moon, the map's runes were written
on the day that it was written. It's literally unbelievable luck. And even the narrator makes that clear. I mean, it's just, what's it say here? Oh, yeah, that there really not been a chance before, and there would not have been another until goodness knows when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is an astronomical chance.
Literally astronomical.
Pun intended. Exactly. That this could actually happen. I mean, clearly there is something at work here.
Yeah. You know what? And this is where I have to quote Corey Olsen again. I'm getting tired of him having, recognized all of this, and written it down before we had a chance to tell you, because I'm sure we'd have come up with something like this.
He's got all these good ideas. We don't borrow many.
No, we don't borrow many, but this phrase this writing is really clear. It would seem that there are only two sensible reactions we can have to these long strings of wildly improbable events. We can either scoff at them and find the whole story rather absurd, or we can begin to suspect that Bilbo's adventure is being orchestrated by some power beyond the wizardry of Gandalf the Grey or the wisdom of Elrond of Rivendell. That's where I land. I mean, this is definitely, the hand of Iluvatar, if you will,
orchestrated by some power. The hand of
it.
Iluvatar.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So the message.
Do you think that it's significant that it's we're first really seeing it here? I mean, Tolkien's first really pointing it out here.
Yeah, it's been building up to this. I think the moments of luck.
Yeah, it certainly has. Yeah, but I think this might be the first time that the narrator really mentions just how astronomical of a chance that this is.
I think it is.
Do you think it's significant that it's here where the story first takes its first steps into the Legendarium?
Yeah,
that
now
makes
he's doing
sense.
That.
I wonder if maybe he just.
After bringing in the Legendarium and tying it to that. Yeah, I mean, I think what happens is, as the narrator, you're aware that the readers are being asked to believe some pretty crazy things. Hey, look, I found this key. Does this fit the lock? Oh, yeah. Hey. Oh, hey, there's swords here. Oh, hey, we found Rivendell, which was practically lucky in itself.
Right.
And then, oh, hey, we're here at the right time to get these moon runes. I think at some point the narrator has to realize the audience is going to start dismissing this stuff as absolutely, Deus Ex Machina, as just the author creating these, setups, and having unbelievable luck get them out of trouble. And yet, I think this is now, this is the time then for the narrator to say, that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is there's a hand at work.
Yeah.
That's,
there's a higher purpose.
That's got a greater plan. And, No, I think you're right. I think there is some significance to it taking place at the same time as it's being tied into that greater Legendarium. You're right. That's a good insight.
Yeah. Because he's probably just realizing that, and I mean, obviously we know that at this point he really doesn't know exactly what the significance is going to be. He doesn't know what's going to happen to Bilbo's story after the end of The Hobbit. But maybe he does.
Let alone the rest of the Legendarium. I mean,
let alone right, exactly. But maybe he does have an idea that now this story has to start working according to the mechanics of my Legendarium.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly.
It's an interesting thought, and I think it's and I think that's one of the things that I think so many audiences that are critical of Tolkien's work are they find so jarring that there is this higher purpose at work because it does kind of seem like all these things are just conveniently falling into place. And that's why I think a deeper understanding of what Tolkien's getting at, that's where a deeper understanding of the philosophy behind this world.
That's why we spent so much time talking about Boethius, right?
Right, exactly. where, you know, the theology, not as much Tolkien's personal theology, but the theology of Middle-earth, the theology of the Legendarium, why that's important to understand, because without it, it does just look like, well, that's just impossible. How could that ever happen?
Understanding that does inform.
Once you understand the mechanics, once you understand, you know, Eru, you know, Iluvatar and the Valar and everything. I mean,
and the notion of the music,
then it all makes
and fate,
sense.
and exactly. It really does. That's why.
There again, it's almost like we planned all this. With reading the Silmarillion
almost
first.
like we read the Silmarillion first on purpose. What do you make of this message? Stand by the gray stone when the thrush knocks.
Oh man, that's an interesting one. We'll see more of that later, won't we?
Oh yes, we will. It's the thrush knocks, not when a thrush knocks. There's a particular thrush that's going to knock.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that.
I think of that kind of definite article and be like, you know, there is the gray stone, not a gray stone. There's a gray stone that you need to be standing by, and you need to be standing by it when a particular thrush.
When a particular thrush knocks. That's a good catch. I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, and it just makes me think there's something very, very specific that's going to happen at the right time. There will be a thrush knocking, and it is this particular thrush that's already been predetermined to have this happen. Yeah.
There you go, and that's another sign.
Another sign
of this larger purpose.
The nature of that plan, right?
Yeah.
So Durin, of course.
Durin's Day, I think, is something that I want to spend some time on later. I know that there's a lot of work that's been done.
A lot of work.
On Durin's Day, and we've actually had some questions to Barliman's bag.
There's
I'm
a lot of math involved.
Here for now.
There's a lot of math.
Yeah,
so
and I can't do that, but I can read John Ratliff. And
yes, we can.
There's some information there. I guess I'll just say I'll leave it there for now, and we'll promise to get into Durin's Day when this comes back later.
Exactly. Now we do get the backstory though a little bit. We get the fact that Durin was the first of the Longbeards, which is the eldest of the races of the dwarves. And he is the oldest of the seven fathers, and that Thorin is his heir. I mean, that's really significant in terms of Thorin's importance. Now we're confirmed he is a really important dwarf.
that is very true.
You know, it's he may be
of the
smug
seven,
and
of the seven kings of dwarves living today, he would be the senior.
Yeah, absolutely. Which so he's pretty darn important. But I also find it very interesting, this line that we're not going to read, but, I'll read this part. It passes our skill in these days to guess when such a time will come again.
Oh,
They don't know how to calculate this anymore.
No.
But they used to.
Yeah.
So
it's another sign of...
It's a skill they've lost. It's another sign of this decay.
Another sign of their decline. We talked about this in chapter 1, about, this sort of faded glory of the dwarves and all this culture and civilization that they've lost.
And they have lost a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very medieval in a sense. It's very Anglo-Saxon.
It is Anglo-Saxon in that sense, where you look back and say culture and civilization were greater then than they are now.
They are today.
Our modern thinking it's all about progress.
It's constantly
forward.
going progress up and up.
Right.
Yeah.
And that
we're always more enlightened and more advanced than we were 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But in the Middle Ages it was not like that.
No. And that really is seen here with this decline of the ability.
But I like that, Thorin is starting to fear, almost maybe despair a little bit, that, we could never guess when that time will come again.
Right.
But I love Gandalf's response. That remains to be seen. Again, another reminder that there is a larger purpose at work.
There is a plan.
And
there's absolutely a plan.
And so it is the more I'm reading this now and the more we're talking about it, the more I'm realizing that I think it is absolutely intentional that Tolkien starts making this higher purpose more clear in this chapter.
I agree. My goodness. I'm going to wrap up the last paragraph and then we'll get to some good questions in the bag, I think.
All right.
The next morning was a midsummer's morning, as fair and fresh as could be dreamed. Blue sky and never a cloud, and the sun dancing on the water. Now they rode away amid songs of farewell and good speed, with their hearts ready for more adventure, and with a knowledge of the road they must follow over the misty mountains to the land beyond. I love that. Their hearts ready for more adventure. It's
a short passage, but there's quite a bit there, isn't there?
There really is. It comes back to that line about about the hope that they had, that they had been restored. That
You see the inversion from the very first paragraph when they were, they were kind of downtrodden.
Yeah, when there were no songs.
They were scared. Yeah, exactly.
No songs, and probably the weather was bad too, right?
That's right.
Not then.
Yeah.
They don't. Yeah, now that I'm looking at
that's
it.
right. No, the weather was bad at the beginning of chapter 2.
Right.
You're right.
I was looking at the last chapter.
But you're right. Songs of farewell, and their hearts ready for more adventure.
Yeah.
They've been uplifted by this time in Rivendell,
and given some practical advice. Right, the knowledge of the road they must follow, because we learned earlier, as Gandalf said, there really is only one path. If we don't stay on that
the road
path,
is all that stands between them and certain doom.
Certain doom.
And now they've got knowledge of the road that they have to follow, and that's really lovely. It's a short chapter, but it's such a powerful chapter.
It really is.
And it's it's no surprise that Rivendell is such an important place for lots of us Tolkien fans.
I agree. I think it shows the restorative power of hope and of even of fairy. Going back to the on fairy stories thing, it really shows that role. We talk about all the other things that it serves, escape and consolation, but this, I think, shows the recovery aspect of it more than anything else.
Yes, absolutely. Man. We see that in a very literal sense here.
We do.
And we see how it's useful to people in that world, as well as to those of us who are reading about it.
We get the escape and the recovery there as well.
Right.
But
the
folks in the story get the recovery, and it's a much needed recovery, because we are about to get to some very difficult adventures soon.
Oh, man.
But that was a really great discussion again, Sean, so thank you. And folks, be sure to join us again next week, because thanks to our Patreon family, we're now releasing episodes every single week.
That's right. So tune in next week when we find out why you should never go to sleep in a strange cave.
That is good advice. Before we see what Bartleman has for us, I want to ask you folks, if you believe we've earned your support here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we want you to please consider joining our Patreon family at patreon.com/prancingponypod. Really, it's such a huge help, and it's thanks to our Patreon family that we've been able to move to these weekly episodes and put in that extra time and put in some of the extra resources we've done. But we have more goals to reach, and we have some really cool rewards too, like exclusive content.
In fact, one of the bits of exclusive content that we offer our patrons is a postscript to each episode. I think we're up to about 10 or 15 minutes on average lately.
I know.
But basically what these are is, we record these episodes in advance, and so we get a chance to listen to these episodes before it releases. And so what we do is we record these postscripts after we listen to the episode, just to talk about any jokes maybe we missed out on, or any topics we wanted to explore more. Things like that.
Or fix any of Sean's
mistakes we made, although we rarely make those.
Oh, almost never. So, we record these special Patreon exclusive postscripts, and we release them the same day as the episode. I think we have them post 2 hours later. So you can listen to the episode and then directly go to your Patreon feed and listen to that. So if you want access to those bonuses, be sure to join the Fellowship of the Podcast at the Gift of Gondor level or higher. We also want to take a moment to thank those of you who have already joined. You really are helping to make this show even better in terms of the resources and time that we're able to put into it. And let's not forget a very special shout out to Maya in Michigan and Jason in British Columbia, our patrons at the Kierdance contribution tier. Folks, if you want a personalized shout out on our episodes, well, now you know where to go.
Yes, a huge thank you to both of them.
Very much so.
And while your support would be greatly appreciated, we do not want you to feel obligated. Only support us if you can afford it, and only if you think we've earned it. Do we want you to consider signing up on Patreon? Otherwise, just keep enjoying the free podcast, because we'll keep making it.
That's right. And we really, I know we ask you about this, and we mean it. We appreciate it. But really, this isn't a PBS drive, okay? The show's going to still be around. We're going to keep on making quality content, but we really do appreciate your help in that. So,
yes,
Sean, do we have, I think we've got a couple questions today, right?
We do have 2 questions that are very relevant to the material we discussed today.
Good.
I'm going to jump right into those. First of all, Tom G. from Weymouth, Massachusetts, wrote in saying, "Why is it that Gandalf couldn't read the runes on the swords the dwarves found?
Well, there you go.
Were these perhaps some of the works of Maeglin with skill he learned from the dwarves or his father?"
Okay, yeah, we talked about that.
So you may recall in our last episode, I said we would get back to this. Why is it that Gandalf, the well-traveled wizard and scholar who, just happens to be a Maya from Valinor.
Just happens,
Actually from beyond. Why does he not know how to read runes carved by a smith of Gondor?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he is a creature of the thought of Iluvatar.
Of the thought of Iluvatar, yeah. He should be able to read some runes. It doesn't really seem to compute at first glance, but take a close look at the text in that passage, and if you heard our last episode on it, you saw that we did take a close look at it. That passage says, "When we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them." Gandalf doesn't say that he can't read them. The text doesn't say that he can't read the runes in the sense that they're indecipherable. It just says that they can't read them now. And there could be any number of reasons for that. Maybe it's too dark, or maybe they're in a stinky troll cave and they want to get out of there really quickly.
Well, there is that, or they could have been covered in filth and dried blood.
Yes, there could be that too, yeah. It's just a matter of...
shut,
Yeah. It's just...
Maybe you're not even be able to pull them all out of the scabbard. You don't never know.
That could be, yeah. All we know is that they cannot read them right now. But notice that Gandalf doesn't even try.
Yeah.
And that's what leads me to an interesting conclusion. Let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. Gandalf totally could read Elvish runes.
Oh, of course he could.
Gandalf could read Elvish runes. They weren't hidden. They weren't the moon runes that we just saw.
No, you're right.
So there's nothing hidden. The only answer that makes any kind of sense is that he could read the runes, and that probably means that he did read them, or at least maybe took a quick glance at them, and probably saw enough to know that he wanted to keep the identity of the sword secret from the dwarves.
Ah, yes.
And I'm speculating a little bit here, but I think this makes a lot of sense.
He knows where they're going next. I mean, after all, he already scouted out the road ahead.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. He knows they're going to Rivendell next. And notice what happens in this chapter. He gives the swords to Elrond to read, allowing Elrond to be the one to make the identification. And then Elrond gives the swords back. And as we noted in the discussion, Elrond is the great-grandson of Turgon, the king of Gondolin, so the swords really are his by right.
Yeah.
So when he gives the swords to Gandalf and Thorin, he's doing a little good deed to bring together the elves and the dwarves. He's also gifting the swords to them to use. But I think Gandalf knew exactly what he was doing here. I think when he saw those swords, either he read the runes quickly, or he recognized that they were from Gondolin. He recognized the craftsmanship, and he knew they were from Gondolin. So he wanted to bring them to Elrond so that Elrond could sort of covertly decide what to do with them.
Right. Because if he'd identified them already and said, hey, these are first-stage swords from Gondolin, they might even be, these famous swords, let's take them to Elrond. It's a different tone. It's a different mood that you get, when Thorin then, lets Elrond look at his sword.
Yeah. This kind of allows Elrond to make the discovery, and I think that's key.
Yeah, that may be total speculation, and we do that, but it's a reasonable speculation. I mean, it fits with the character of Gandalf and his purpose on this mission.
Yeah,
quest thing. Sorry, I had to go there.
Well, that rules you out, Pip.
Yes, it does. So we have another question, right?
Yeah, we do have another question about the swords, and this one comes to us from Shane K. And I'm sorry, Shane, I don't remember where you wrote to us from, or maybe you didn't tell me. But Shane wrote in asking... Could be. No. My question to you guys is on the Elven Blade Orcrist. Who do you think used that sword? And he's referring, of course, to when it was in Gondor.
Because, of course, Glandring was Turgon, so who was Orcrist?
Right. Who did Orcrist belong to? Shane says, I know some say it was Turgon, but that he never used it.
Well, he never took a point in double wielding.
Right, right, exactly. Some say it is Agalmoth, which is a character that's mentioned in the Book of Lost Tales. I don't think is actually named in the Silmarillion.
No, I don't remember that name from the Silmarillion.
But some say it's this Agalmoth character because he's the only elf who's mentioned as using a bent blade. Shane says, I am in the camp that believes that it was Ecthelion's sword. It was stated that they used long, bright swords and loved jewels in his House of the Fountains. And then in The Hobbit, it's stated that Orcrist had a jeweled hilt and was etched with runes and was gleaming. Right. But he says, I don't remember it being referenced as a bent blade. Yeah. So he's asking what we think about that. And I gotta say, I mean, it's a good question, certainly. To be honest, I don't remember Orcrist being referenced as a curved blade in the book. And having just reread these last couple of chapters, I don't think that that's anywhere in the text here. I think that was something that was just done in the Jackson films, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's true. I looked through the text as well. There's nothing I could find to support the idea that Orcrist was curved. I just think that's another one of the Jackson changes. Now, I get that. He made that change in the films just to distinguish it visually.
From Glamdring,
to make it very different from Glamdring.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was curved, no.
Yeah, I don't think in Tolkien's vision it probably would have been curved. I mean, we don't see that the elves use curved swords that much.
No, typically not, no.
And
I mean, if this Igalmoth character is the only one who's mentioned as using a bent blade, then it's probably because no other elf did. Right.
And I know in the next chapter that he talks about the goblins using curved
that's
swords.
exactly what I was thinking.
Kind of more like scimitars and things like that.
Right.
I think
and
Jackson
he describes the same thing for the Southrons too, I think.
I think you're probably
they
right.
use curved blades, I think, in Return of the King or the Haradrim. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah.
But again, I think typically those are bad guy swords.
Yeah, right. I think just a little bit of cinematic license that Jackson was taking with, and he did this in Lord of the Rings too. I think Arwen's sword in Lord of the Rings was a curved sword. Kind of more like almost more like a katana look.
Yeah,
like
very much
sword.
like a katana. Yeah.
So I guess to that I don't think that it's necessarily a bent blade according to Tolkien. So I don't think it necessarily has to belong to this Igalmoth.
No.
Whoever it belonged to, it definitely had to be somebody high ranking.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In Fellowship, Glamdring is referred to as Orcrist's mate.
That's
which
right.
Suggests, and that to me suggests that they weren't just found together, that they were somehow part of a matching set.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that they belong to the same person, but they could have been, made together, or maybe they.
Made by the same smith at the same time, sort of thing.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I guess I got to say, I kind of like the possibility that it could be Ecthelion.
Right.
One other interesting little detail I found when looking at this is I remembered that if you look at the fall of Gondolin from the Book of Lost Tales, which, although it's very early and kind of incompatible, it's the most complete version we have of that story.
Sure.
That version actually says that Ecthelion lost his sword fighting Gothmog, and then ended up killing him with the spike of his helm.
Yeah.
So there is a possibility there. I mean, total speculation, but I kind of like Ecthelion's chances. I don't know. What about you?
If we have to assign possession of Orcrist to anyone, which of course we don't.
No, that's true. We don't have to.
I would say Ecthelion as well. I would.
Yeah.
I mean, partly out of his high position in Gondolin, and partly because of what you mentioned, him losing his sword. But, it seems he loved jewels. I think that's what kind of rings true to me. If you remember from our episode on Tuor, when Tuor and Voronwë made it to the Great Gate, he being Ecthelion, was clad in all silver. There was a diamond on the spike of his helmet, and his shield, I loved this line, shimmered as if it were bedewed with drops of rain that were indeed 1,000 studs of crystal. That's right.
And I think we actually read that passage, or we talked about that passage in episode 41.
I remember that. Man.
That's right. Yep. Had a lot of style, that Lord of the Fountains.
A lot of bling.
A lot of bling, yep. I think Thorin would approve.
I think he would. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. As always, we thank you very much for joining us. Be sure to join us again next week when we go over hill and under hill and meet dun dun dun
goblins.
Those little Moria orcs. Folks, we really want to encourage you all to read along and take notes in your own copy of The Hobbit. So please check out our official library tab on the website, theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got links to everything from cheap paperbacks to some, pretty good stuff for your Tolkien collection.
Absolutely. And if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review for us there, we'd certainly be grateful. Those reviews help us get some more visibility in iTunes, and that translates to just a bigger and more vibrant Tolkien community here listening and talking about the show. Absolutely. And thanks to those of you who have, by the way. We really do read every one of them, and we appreciate all the nice things you say about us, even if they make us blush. We also appreciate the constructive feedback, so we do, listen to that. It's funny, we really do. We have some folks who say we don't disagree enough. We have somebody else say we disagree the perfect amount, but we'll try to figure it out.
In the meantime, make sure you never
It's
miss
hard to disagree when we're both so right.
That's what I was going to say. Of course you can't disagree with me. I'm right. I mean, what are we going to do? Please.
Except when we're not.
Exactly. And there are a few of those.
There are a few of those.
We both wrong. You lead me down the Dunsany path, except then it was the Dunsany path. And,
The Dunsany path.
I made that, I just nodded and said, sure, whatever
You're like,
you
yeah,
say.
that sounds right. Yeah,
Sounds
let's go
good to me. Oh, goodness. Folks, please never miss an episode of our digressions and laugh at ourselves. Never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony podcast by subscribing to the podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And, of course, you can find us in just about any podcast directory. Check out the podcast app on iOS 11. It supports our new season and episode tag, so you can see that this is season 2, episode whatever. So it's a nice little way to keep them organized.
Yeah, definitely some cool new features in there for you iPhone users. And we want to thank those of you who have become part of our social media family. We set out to start a Tolkien conversation that everyone could join, which is why we have the online common room on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
That's right. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or secret messages written in moon runes. Please, no silly Elvish song lyrics. To Barliman, I know, sorry, Sean, that means you can't write in. To Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com. That's our new email address, so be sure to take note. Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com. And we'll try to get him into our next episode. Well, an hour 25 is still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners, but that was how long the chapter was. So we can't help it. But until next time, folks.
Farewell, friends.